Less gabbing, more pushing.
Today on MuscleCar, Project Red Sled is ready for her big finale. See what it takes to turn back the clock on a piece of MuscleCar history. Find out why this race-ready Mustang marked the end of an era. And Rick steers us in the right direction with a low-buck steering box rebuild.
Hey guys, welcome to MuscleCar. A lot of vehicles have gone through our shop, and some, as I'm sure you've noticed, have a tendency to stick around a little bit longer than others. Now, we knock out a few of them in just a couple of days, like a year one track car or the MagnaFlow Mustang. Now, others we transform in just a couple months, like Blue Collar Buick or the UFC Cuda.
And then there are those that have their way of hanging around for a while, like Altered Eagle. Now, some of y'all give us a hard time about these type of projects. But if you've ever tried to roll the clock back on a 50-year-old piece of Swiss cheese, you know it can't be done overnight. And that brings us to Project Red Sled.
Straight out of a cornfield. This poor thing was hanging around since the very first episode of MuscleCar. When we finally decided to roll it into the shop, we knew it was going to be our biggest challenge yet. But we didn't let that stop us. We got right to work blowing it apart, then cleaned up the X-frame and got busy adding some bracing.
We mocked up the air ride, strapped on the Foose wheels, and stood back to watch it do its thing. Next, the frame got a layer of powder coat because it's tough and beautiful. Back at the shop, the body got some major surgery, including new pans, wider tubs, patch panels, hammer and dolly work, and new braces.
We got some of the panels smoothed out, primered and test fitted, and checked the gaps before going any further. Time to drop in the heart of this project, our 500-horse Chevy 409, backed up by a 4-speed. The true test of our devotion came when we pulled the body back off and dedicated untold hours to the bodywork. This layer of filler primer was blocked, then we reprimed, blocked again, and sealed it up before we finally let the old girl live up to her name.
We each added our own custom touch, Rick with an airbrush emblem, and I fabbed up a one-off console. After taking care of a few more details and final assembly, it was ready to head out to the upholstery shop for the final phase of this total restoration.
Today, we can finally say the words that we've been waiting so long to hear. Project Red Sled is done. And here she is, looking 50 years younger, thanks to guys like Advanced Plating, Year One, and Dakota Digital.
Drenched in chrome, rolling on 22s, and sporting eye-popping paint and graphics, there's no danger of losing Red Sled in any crowd.
The Flowmaster exhaust snakes its way under a well-detailed chassis fed by a nitro-plated set of Doug's headers.
Lamar Walden's accessories and pulley set, along with XS Power's compact battery, add the final details to our dual-quad 409. The last time you saw Red Sled, it was headed out for a major upholstery makeover. M&M Hot Rod Interiors is known for their custom work, and I thought it'd be cool to see how the pros would handle this kind of job. So I headed down to Alabama to take a look at the progress. Wayne and Pamela McGriff not only own M&M, they do a lot of the work too, and they were ready for Red Sled.
With dozens of high-profile builds under the belts, it's no wonder they were able to come up with a plan to make the interior as unique as the rest of the car.
Using the old panels as a guide, Pamela started making fresh ones out of aluminum. Meanwhile, Wayne worked on recovering our old bucket seats.
It takes true craftsmanship and a lot of patience to do what these guys do, and for everyone at M&M, it's a real labor of love.
And the results speak for themselves. They knocked this one out of the park with a look that's classy with a sinister edge. The Dakota digital gauges give a modern twist while still blending in with the classic styling.
There's only two things missing now, a passenger and a driver.
Up next, Giddy Up 409. It's the big payoff for years of hard work. And later, Rick puts some wow into rebuilding your steering box.
We've all got a top 10 list of cars we want to drive, and high up on my list has always been a 409 4-speed Impala. Red Sled was born during a time when they weren't shy about chrome. Fins may have been on their way out, but 1961 marked a new direction for GM styling. Smooth and clean with plenty of eye candy.
And in case you're wondering how big her lungs are, once you crack open those 2/4, just about anything on the road.
It's kind of cool to finally be driving it.
You know, it is weird though. You think about all the work and stuff that goes into them, and then the actual joy of getting to drive it around, it kind of blurs all them memories and words. Your car rides good, man.
It does, dude.
For one reason, I'm not really worried about driving. I'm sitting too good to have to worry about driving. There was a pothole around.
Where? And this old girl's a cruiser. I'd love to take her to a car show, or better yet, an old drive-in movie theater.
Yeah, that sounds cool. I know where one's at, not too far from here if you want to check it out.
Oh, heck yeah. You mind if we pick up my girl? Nothing personal, dude, but I don't know if I want to sit in a dark car with you for 2 hours.
Nah, that's cool. Let's pick her up.
Right on.
Honey, this is so romantic. But where's Tommy?
No, that's all right, baby. Don't worry about Tommy. I gave him some food and water in a bowl.
What?
It's all right.
Hey, man, Rick, come on, man. Let me out. Come on, man.
After the break, Mustang plus Shelby plus Cobra Jet equals one mean muscle car. And later, give your biceps a break with a steering box rebuild. Today's Flashback, a 1969 Mustang Shelby GT 500.
The man, Carroll Shelby, engineer, race driver. The car, the Shelby Mustang GT.
When Carroll Shelby and Ford joined forces in the 60s to make a race-ready Mustang, it was a perfect match. The GT350 and GT500 would cement the Mustang's muscle car reputation forever.
But as the 60s wore on, the happy couple started drifting apart. Shelby was all about racing, and Ford wanted more luxury. Shelby gave it one last go in '69 and then called it quits.
Yeah, but he went out with a bang. His numbers matching GT500, dipped in candy apple red, is a fitting end to a great era of performance. Outfitted with a Ram Air 428 Cobra Jet, it cranked out well over the officially rated 335 horsepower and could hit 60 in just 5.5 seconds.
It's got the stock 735 carburetor, original exhaust manifolds, original intake, and of course we had it dynoed and it was pushing right at 450 horsepower.
Mustangs had a whole new look for '69, and so did the Shelby. Previous models had all been built at Shelby American in LA, but as the relationship with Ford went south, production went north and east to Michigan, where it was built right alongside its stablemates.
All GT500 started off as Mach 1s. A specially designed full-width grille was fitted with fog lights underneath.
Fiberglass had been used on the hood and spoiler before, but this marked the first time it was used for the fenders too. In the rear, the dual exhaust was routed to the center with newly styled tips.
Oh, and how about those scoops? This thing's got more scoops than a Baskin-Robbins. There are 5 just on the hood alone. 3 face forward and 2 face backwards for maximum airflow.
They were called NASA ducts, which I think stood for not another scoop already. The front fenders and the rear quarters each got a scoop too, which fed air to cool down the brakes.
Performance enhancements were the same as a Mach 1. Traction lock rear axle and heavy duty suspension. It all rolled on E70 by 15 wide ovals wrapped around unique cast aluminum 5-spoke wheels.
Inside was a mixture of race features and creature comforts. There was a roll bar and harness, plus a console shifter with light switches and gauges, a radio, and a nifty fold-down rear seat, known as a sport deck.
The rising cost of the GT 500, this one was $4,200, along with competition from the Mach 1 and Boss Mustangs, caused sales to plummet. Shelby parted with Ford in the summer of '69, which would have been the end of the Shelby Mustangs.
Yeah, would have been, except Ford still had 789 Shelbys left at the end of the year. So they added a couple tweaks and resold them as 70 models. Now that makes the 69 Shelbys, for all practical purposes, the last of that fine breed of performance cars.
Coming up, Rick pitches a how-to project you won't want to miss.
Stop having a boring box, stop having a boring life.
You're watching MuscleCar. For a DVD copy of this episode, just go to PowerBlockTV.com and order your copy for just $5.95 plus shipping and handling. Start your own MuscleCar collection, delivered right to your door from the PowerBlock.
You know, if you're looking to get a really good workout for your arms and drive to work at the same time, you can do both simultaneously. Just pop in an old greasy steering box like this. You get this, cameraman? Stop having a boring box, stop having a boring life. It's not going to help you steer your wheels, but it will help you get those biceps you've always wanted. That leaking fluid lubes up your tie rods, and when it gets on your exhaust, it gives you that great burning oil smell that always attracts the ladies. You ready for it? Here's how to order. All right, guys, I think you get the point. If you'd rather actually enjoy driving your car than an old busted up leaking steering box, well, it can pretty much turn your pleasure cruise into a real drag. Now the good news is it's a pretty easy fix, and you can save about $150 by rebuilding your unit versus buying a refurbished one off the shelf.
Build on a budget. MuscleCar projects that save you time and money.
And when you call in at the parts store to get a rebuild kit, you can just go by the year, make, and model of the vehicle. But if you're thinking the box may have been swapped out at some point, then your best bet is go by the numbers that you see stamped right in the top of the box. Now, removing a steering box is pretty straightforward, so I went ahead and dropped it out and got this one cleaned up. Now, once you get it on the bench, the first thing you need to do is get that pitman arm pulled off. Now, these things can be really tough to remove, so have a puller and torch ready, just in case it's got an attitude. Try to heat the arm, but not the shaft. And you don't have to get a cherry red. You just want it hot enough to expand a little, allowing it to come loose. And before you put the time and money into rebuilding the box, a quick and easy thing to check is make sure that your sector shaft right here is straight. Because if the car has ever been in a collision and the wheels have been hit, it can actually take that pitman arm, run it all the way to one side, and twist that shaft right there. So just make sure that your splines are straight. Before you pull it apart, make sure to center the steering shaft. That's centered. The sector shaft comes out by removing the C-clip, unbolting the cover, and tapping the shaft out with a soft hammer. To access the rack piston, use an awl to push the retaining ring out of the groove. But don't worry about saving it. A new one comes in the rebuild kit. To push the end plug out, rotate the input shaft to the left. Just like that. Now you can pull the piston out, and be careful because there's going to be some ball bearings falling out here in a second. Now keep those bearings because you are going to need them. Next, remove the C-clip from the adjuster plug. Then use a brass punch to loosen the lock nut. Now using a spanner wrench, remove the adjuster plug and pull the stub shaft and steering worm gear from the housing. Where'd you go? There you go. Next, pry out the outer and inner sector shaft seals and washers. Then flip the housing over and tap out the needle bearing. All right, got the housing blasted and painted and looking good, and I got all the rest of the parts here cleaned up and ready for reassembly. Now, I ran down and bought a kit that came with all of these parts, and it ran under $50. Replace all the seals on the stub shaft, making sure not to pinch or damage them. Press the new needle bearing into the adjuster plug, lube the plug with some petroleum jelly, and seat it on the stub shaft. The rack piston gets a new seal. Then those bearings you saved come into play. Line the bearings up in the guide. There are 2 different color-coded sizes, and you need to make sure to alternate them. Reinstall the guide to the piston. The rest of the bearings go inside the bore using petroleum jelly to keep them in place. Now again, alternate the sizes. The worm should drop right in if you did this all correctly. Now you can pull the worm gear back out, attach it to the stub shaft, and insert the assembly into the housing. After reinstalling the adjuster plug, tighten the lock nut with a brass drift. The rack piston goes in next and must be threaded onto the worm gear inside the housing. It's really easy to knock the ball bearings out of their grooves, so just take your time. The end plug and O-ring go in next, secured by a new retaining ring. The sector shaft bearing is tapped in next, followed by new seals and washers. And make sure to install the double lip seal on the outside. The sector shaft gets a new gasket, then gets tapped in. Just make sure everything is centered before you put it in, then tighten down the cover. Check the box for smooth operation, lock to lock. Now, the final step in rebuilding the steering box is adjusting the preload on the pitman arm. It's kind of the same thing as adjusting preload on a wheel bearing. You don't want it too tight, otherwise it'll start galling parts. You don't want that. Too loose, and you can have problems also. That feels pretty good right there. Now remember, if you guys got any questions about anything that I've used today, hop online and go to PowerBlockTV.com. You can check it all out. I got to go put this back on the car, but for this week, we're out of time. So until next time, we're out of here.